and it has been an excellent journey. I will have to say, we're entering a new sermon series as we make our way through the Lenten season, and we're going to be looking at the book of Esther. It is helpful to be surrounded by good Jewish folk when you're looking at Hebrew scriptures, and they wrote my sermon for me, so I'm just going to share what I learned from them in these past few weeks as we spent time together in the Holy Land. Our text this morning comes from Esther chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, and 15 through 18. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. When the king's servants who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint commissioners in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in the citadel of Susa under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women. Let their cosmetic treatments be given them, and let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This pleased the king, and he did so. Now there was a Jew in the citadel of Susa whose name was Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with King Jeconiah of Judah, whom King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had carried away. Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his cousin, for she had neither father nor mother. The girl was fair and beautiful, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai adopted her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in the citadel of Susa in the custody of Haggai, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put in the custody of Haggai, who had charge over the women. The girl pleased him and won his favor, and he quickly provided her with cosmetic treatments and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen maids from the king's palace, and advanced her and her maids to the best place in the harem. Esther did not reveal her people or kindred, for Mordecai had charged her not to tell. Every day Mordecai would walk around in the front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and how she fared. When the turn came for Esther, daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had adopted her as his own daughter, to go in to the king, she asked for nothing except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised. Now Esther was admired by all who saw her. When Esther was taken to the king Ahasuerus in his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tabith, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the other women. Of all the virgins, she won his favor and devotion, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet to all his officials and ministers, Esther's banquet. He also granted a holiday to the provinces and gave gifts with royal liberality. This is a challenging story. This is a story of a woman who has her power taken from her, who has found herself surrounded by men in a chauvinistic time and place. This is not our culture, not the way in which we live today, thank goodness. In order to understand the bigger picture of Esther and where she comes from and who she is, we need to know that before we meet Esther, there was a queen. Her name was Vashti. She is the king's original spouse, but refused to obey the king. She refused to be presented or shown off as some sort of property. And because of her refusal to be subjugated, to be objectified, she is set aside by the king. Some people who have interpreted this story, who have read it, look at Queen Vashti as a hero as well in the story. Someone who stands up and refuses to be objectified, refuses to be looked at in a way other than the human being standing right in front of you. The scripture then says after the king's anger had abated, he wanted a new queen. Reminds me of that James Brown tune, It Was a Man's World. Not necessarily a good one. In the context of this chauvinism, in this abuse of power, we meet Esther. The scriptures tell us that her cousin Mordecai is taking care of her because her parents, they have passed away. The scripture doesn't say what happened. Maybe in their march from Jerusalem to Babylon into the exile, they perished along the way. We don't know. Was it that long march through the desert? Was it because someone viewed them as less than human? That their lives didn't matter as much as others in the kingdom? I don't know. The scripture doesn't say. What it does say is that Mordecai takes her in, treats her as his own daughter, cares for her, protects her, loves her. And then the king sends out this edict that all young women in this time be brought to him so that he can choose a new queen. Mordecai is in a land where he has very little power. He cannot protest without endangering himself and his cousin. He can do little, as Esther is sort of forced to participate in this ancient beauty pageant with terrible results. One of the important things to remember is that in the biblical text, names are important. And the writer goes to great lengths to tell us what Esther's real name is, her Hebrew name, Hadassah. Hadassah means myrtle tree. It's a beautiful tree, like that one right there. And it is one of the 4 species that are used in the festival of Sukkot, 4 different types of plants that are used to celebrate this harvest festival. The myrtle tree represents certain aspects of our connection with God or the way in which we see the world or ourselves. The Hadassah can represent the eye. It can also represent other things like love or even marriage within the Hebrew context. Esther's name, Hadassah, is representative of this beautiful plant, this beautiful flower. She is beautiful. She has a love for her people. But as we continue to deepen our understanding of Esther, we will also note her strength of character as well. I suspect as we learn more about this woman, we will discover more than what's on the outside. Although the men and the powerful of her time had difficulty seeing anything more than that, we, as interpreters in our own context, will perhaps discover something deeper, something greater. The Festival of Purim, I mentioned one festival, Sukkot. The Festival of Purim is coming up March 9th. The Festival of Purim is a minor festival for the Jewish people. But every year around this time, they come together and they tell the story of Esther. Esther's a complicated story, as I mentioned earlier. It's a challenging story, even to our modern ears. It comes with all kinds of things, but it's a very dramatic tale as well. And so around this time, every year, the Jewish folk will come together, tell this story, and it's a big party for one night. They dress up in costumes. It's sort of like a mini Halloween. They eat and they drink and they drink and keep telling the story until eventually it's difficult to tell who is really the hero of the story and who is the villain. And what they will tell you is that the reason they do this is to help us understand that God has a way of loving even the most challenging of people, and helping us to find a way through even the most difficult circumstances. One of the things that they enjoy around this time of year is the hamantashen. A hamantashen is a pastry. I don't know if there are any in the city. I didn't even know this existed until I was in Israel. I was noticing all these costume shops, and they're like sort of pop-up costume shops around this time of year as we were walking in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. But we would also go to bakeries as well. And you need to know when you're in Jerusalem or anywhere in the world, you need to visit the local bakeries. It's just important for you to do that. And as we were there, I was traveling along with one of my Jewish friends. He said, "Oh, hamantashen." And I was like, "Whoa, what's that?" There are these triangle pastries that are filled with either dates, or they're filled with figs, or my personal favorite, they're filled with chocolate. Now, I know they're my personal favorite because I tried the other two. I tried all of them. We were sitting there in that cafe in Tel Aviv just a few days ago, and I was eating this hamantashen. I turned to my friend, and my Jewish friend, and I said, "Hey, what's this all about? What are these pastries supposed to mean in the story of Esther?" And he says that legend has it the villain of the story, who we've not met yet, Haman, was said to have worn a triangular hat. And I was like, okay. And so these pastries remind us of the villain. But I was talking with another Jewish friend as we were going along. He's a rabbi, and he said, some of the rabbis say that instead of representing the triangular hat, the villain, it really represents the hero of the story, Esther. And that when you eat the pastry, you're sort of consuming, destroying this person. Now, I know that's dark, and it takes a really pretty dark turn, but I want us to stay there for a moment because what he says makes a lot of sense. As we've heard from the story today, we have this woman whose power is taken away, who has very little choices in the text. And at every turn, it seems like she is being taken advantage of by those with power in her community. Those people who could have protected her and viewed her as more than an object, but a human being. I really enjoyed getting to know more about the festival of Purim, of eating the hamantashen, of hearing from my rabbi friends and others in our group this past week about Esther. They understood her in a different way than I did. They saw her and her story as one that was worthy of telling over and over again. Esther is a fascinating book. It almost didn't make it into Scripture. The reason for it is nowhere in the book of Esther will you find the name of God. It doesn't appear in there. But they decided to hold on to the story, and we too, in our text, have decided to hold on to this story because of the character, the person, the strength, the love of the hero of the story, who we'll get to know better over the next few weeks. This story is fraught with exploitation, abuse of power, and life or death consequences. So why a sermon series on Esther? I would argue that even in our own context, we live in a world fraught with exploitation, abuse of power, and life or death consequences. Not a sermon series on a woman who in the ancient world was somehow able to navigate such treacherous waters. How was she able to do it? What can we learn from her or the characters, the people who help her in her journey, in her time of challenge, heartbreak, uncertainty? And where will God show up in the midst of all of those challenges? Because I think we'll find, although the absence of the word God is in the book of Esther, God seems to leap off the pages. These and other questions we will explore over the next few weeks together. And our prayer as a ministry team, as a congregation, is that we'll find inspiration and strength through one of the most challenging stories in Scripture, and in the character of such a strong woman who can help us learn more about ourselves and about God. A name is more than a name in the ancient and sacred texts. Esther's name, Hadassah, which represents this love, this beauty, but this strength as well. God knows and sees and journeys alongside Esther and knows who she truly is. God sees beyond the objectification of the community and culture around her. God helps her make some challenging choices and decisions in her journey. I would argue that God knows your name, your true name. More than that, God sees through the heart of you, sees to your very core. Despite the labels that we have either given ourselves or other people have placed on us, God sees deeper, knows you deeper, loves you deeper. When you're not sure if you can face the challenges ahead, perhaps we'll remember Esther. Not just Esther the beautiful, but Esther the brave, the strong, the faithful. Along her treacherous journey, as we will walk with her in these next few weeks, we will see how God's love, God's strength, God's community of faithful people walk along beside her through one of the most challenging moments of her life. Even when she doubted what would come next or what would happen to her and her people, God shows up and believed in her. There's a lot we can learn from that. God believes in you. God knows you. God is journeying with you even now, no matter what challenges you are facing. And you're not journeying alone. Like Esther, who had Mordecai and others that will come alongside her, you, my friend, have us to walk alongside you. Right before takeoff, I have a routine on the airplane. I have to put in a headset and listen to some calming music because I got to be honest, I get a little nervous when I'm not driving the thing. I don't want to drive an airplane. I'm just saying. I like to be behind the wheel. We were taking off, leaving Jerusalem, or leaving the Holy Land, leaving this incredible adventure that I'm sure you'll hear about in future sermons. Filled with a week of very, very difficult moments. Living and being in a place where abuse of power, fear, danger, violence seems to be lurking around every corner. Yet somehow discovering a people with a strength to work for peace despite their differences. It's inspiring and it's hard. So I have to listen to some calming music every once in a while, and I put in my headphones, I dialed in Brandy Carlisle, and the joke came on. The second verse of that song goes like this. You get discouraged, don't you, girl? It's your brother's world for a little while longer. You got to dance with the devil on the river to beat the stream. Call it living the dream. Call it kicking the ladder. They come to kick dirt in your face, to call you weak, and then displace you after carrying your baby on your back across the desert. I saw your eyes behind your hair. And you're looking tired, but you don't look scared. Let them laugh while they can. Let them spin. Let them scatter in the wind. I've been to the movies. I've seen how it ends. And the joke's on them. The powerful of Esther's day saw her only in a certain light. But you, the faithful, will get to know her. You, the faithful, will get to learn from her. May we learn from those strong women of faith who were able to stand up in the most dangerous circumstances, to lead, to love, to help us through our own deserts, our own fear, our own uncertainty, and find a way home.